Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford University. But today, I'm really talking to you as the chair of the steering committee of the Japan-U.S. Innovation Awards program. I'm delighted to welcome you to our 11th annual Japan-U.S. Innovation Awards Symposium. Today's program is really the results of a year-long process that involves nomination and pretty severe selection, and that also includes a number of other events, innovation salon programs during the year. And I want to start out by recognizing the 54 people on our Innovation Advisory Council who are the leaders in this nomination and selection process. This is a group of business people and investors and a few academics and also nonprofit sector representatives, both in Japan and the US. And they bring us over 100 companies to look at every year. And we have very kind of interesting discussions about who we would like to feature this year. I want to thank them for their great efforts. I want to thank the sponsors for the financial support of this program. We couldn't do the program without the sponsors. And I also want to thank volunteers who have helped as mentors for our startup companies from Japan. And I would like to also recognize the great efforts by the staff of Society of Northern California and all U.S. Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford in putting on this program. The Japan-U.S. Innovation Awards recognizes the importance of innovation in the U.S.-Japan relationship. We're very happy to highlight exciting innovations that are likely to play an important part in the future of U.S.-Japan business relationships. Especially today, we're happy in this first half of the program to recognize two companies as our leaders, the later stage high growth companies that are already starting to transform an industry or value chain. And next week, at this same time, same channel, we will recognize our innovation showcase of 5 earlier stage Japanese startup companies that we think have innovations with similar potential in the future. I'm delighted that you can be with us today. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm honored to welcome Mr. Toru Maeda, the Consul General of Japan in San Francisco. We want to thank the consulate for your support of this program. And I'd like to ask Consul General Maeda for a few remarks. Consul General, floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those who are participating from Japan. Thank you, Professor Dasher, for the kind introduction. My name is Toru Maeda, Consul General of Japan in San Francisco. And thank you for continuing to organize this excellent event. I'd also like to thank your co-host, the Japan Society of Northern California, and its president, Mr. Akiyama, for inviting me to say a few words. I'm really grateful that Japan-U.S. Innovation Awards Symposium continues to enhance Japanese innovative presence and entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has long been a vital area for Japan-U.S. cooperation. Furthermore, this year in April, Prime Minister Suga of Japan and President Biden had a very fruitful summit meeting in Washington, D.C. And after the meeting, 2 leaders released a joint statement to launch the Japan-U.S. Competitiveness and Resilience Partnership. A key pillar of the statement is to strengthen our partnership in the area of competitiveness and innovation, including biotechnology, AI, and information and communications technology. As we implement this partnership on the ground, the role of Silicon Valley would surely become even more vital. I hope this event serves as a platform for us to engage with one another and share ideas. It may lead to collaboration and innovations that make a partnership stronger I'm also sure you'll find inspiration from the individuals, companies, and technologies present at this symposium. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to recognize two such inspirational examples, namely Astroscale and Color, and congratulate them on receiving the SunBridge Emerging Leader Awards. I'd also like to commend the 5 Japanese companies featured in the Innovation Showcase. I offer my strong encouragement and wishes for their great success. Now, I very much look forward to listening to the presentation from the featured companies, as well as the keynote speech from Ms. Tomoko Nomba, founder and executive chairman of DNA. With that, I close my remarks. Thank you so much again for having me today.
Thank you, Consul General, for those kind remarks. One of the privileges of continuing a program for 11 years now is that we get to see what happens with some of the companies that we believed in a long time ago. And so we have a prior winner report today. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce Mr. Mike Tso, who is co-founder and CEO of Cloudian. Mike is actually a technology background entrepreneur. Mike has 36 patents and has been a technology trailblazer for more than 25 years. Before co-founding Cloudian, he co-founded Gemini Mobile Technologies. He has developed a number of high innovative systems, such as an e-commerce search engine. He, at Intel, developed narrowband sockets. Before that, at Xerox PARC, he developed the first wireless location-aware wearable touch tablet. Mike is a very good contact, and we're delighted to see how Cloudian has developed since we featured them in the Innovation Showcase the very first year we held the showcase, 2015. Let me turn the floor over to Mr. Mike Tso at this point.
Hi, everybody. It's really great back. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So it's really a sort of honor to be asked back here, and I've prepared just a very short set of slides and hope we can go through that, but really hope to have some interesting Q&A. So let me see if I can get the slide sharing to work. Second.
So of course, whatever we do in rehearsal is going to take more time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's harder in real life as always. Okay, so hope everybody can see that. Okay. So this was a picture from 2015 with my co-founder, Hiroshi Ota. It's been 6 years and time's gone over really fast. And so actually, as part of this, putting this presentation together, I had to go back and just take a look at where we were back in 2015. And it was a really fun time to do that. So I'm happy to share some of that with everybody here. So we've really grown a lot since 2015. So first I start off with the employees. We grew, now we're four times the size as 2015. We've raised additional funding. So the total funding for the company is 6 times the size of when we were 2015. And then we've grown our customer base astonishingly 19 times, almost 20 times bigger back then. And then in terms of revenue, we're 32 times at that time. So it felt like a really quick short period, but I guess it's been 6 years. And clearly, when we were selected for the award back then, it was a point of inflection for us because it's been going vertical and very exciting since then. And as anybody running a startup would know, it's very hard to get validation from large industry analysts like Gartner. You know, thankfully our success in the last 6 years has really attracted you know, validation even from people like Gartner. So they came out with a report end of last year that ranked all the competitors in our space for the 5 use cases that are used by customers in our object storage space. And we were very grateful that we were ranked #1 in all 5 of the use cases. And that's very rare in the industry. And it's a very proud accomplishment because it really reflects our entire company's efforts. But you know, we're ranked #1 in data analytics, archiving, backup, cloud storage, and hybrid cloud storage, which is the 5 main use cases. And since 2015, we've received 48 other industry awards. And one of them that we're very, very proud of is this, this is an award by Gartner that's called their Customer's Choice Award. So the difference between the previous award I was talking about is that one is based on internal analysis by Gartner's, you know, industry specialists. This award, the Peer Insights Award, is one that's based on feedback from end user customers. So they basically survey hundreds and hundreds of end users, and they rank Cloudian's product from everything from, you know, product quality to features to customer service, all that, to compare us against all of our competition. And for 2 years in a row, we have been ranked tops by customers, which is a really it's a really heartening award, because that really, you know, reflects again on the entire company, what we've been able to accomplish, and that's what our customers are saying about us. So that's really you know, really great news. And then in terms of where we are as a company today, we have over 600 customers, really customers in all different verticals. You know, one of our very first customer was NTT, and that really helped us get our product really into very top shape, you know, kind of Japanese quality product. And since then, we've been able to win 80 to 90% of all the projects that we get engaged in. We usually win them 80 to 90% of the time. And we have now penetrated a lot of different verticals, including government, higher education, finance, and so on, you know, industrial, and also healthcare. And what's interesting is, you know, we've been all fighting with COVID in the last 18 months, and a lot of the names that you hear about fighting COVID, like Pfizer and the CDC, and, you know, Johns Hopkins, and a lot of these companies, a lot of these entities, they are actually all Cloudian customers. So they all have a lot of data they all store on Cloudian product. And we do 90% of our sales through partners, and generally 2 kinds of partners, OEM partner, which is VMware and Lenovo. And we also have different sort of channel partners, and there's over 700 worldwide. And, you know, back in kind of 2015, we were sort of roughly probably 60% in Japan and 40% overseas in terms of revenue. And now we're sort of basically 90%, over 90% is coming from US and EMEA, and 10% in Japan. Now, it doesn't mean that sort of Japan shrank. Actually, during that time, Japan grew a lot too. It's just everywhere else, we grew a lot faster. And then just one final slide here in terms of what people are using us for. Traditionally, we've done very well in managing very large pools of data for people. So these are like, so people call, you know, big data or machine data. The fastest growing segment for us is protection against ransomware. And part of this is, you might have noticed on the previous slide, we are used by the United States military in a cloud called Mil Cloud. So we have the most secure hardened platform for long-term storage. And so the last 18 months with all the different attacks that's been happening, more than half of our new customers signed during the last 18 months are using us for protection against ransomware. So that's a very fast growing part for us. And then just a few months ago, we launched a partnership with VMware in a modern applications Kubernetes space. And we now have a containerized product that runs on VMware Tanzu and also coming out with IBM OpenShift fairly soon. And about 2 weeks ago, we became an Amazon partner as part of their hybrid cloud effort. There's a product called Amazon Outposts, which essentially puts an Amazon compute pod into an enterprise data center. And we are certified to provide storage alongside of their compute pod. So that's a very important use case for us going forward as well. Without getting into too much detail, I think just a very high level of where we see everything going is more and more data continue to be created around the world, and moving that data around is very costly and very time consuming. So data is going to increasingly become distributed and stored close to where it's being created. And the Cloudian platform is built to already be running on edge and in the cloud and in data centers. So we look to continue to expect to manage more and more of these places wherever people's creating data. And what we do is we manage all this data, making sure that they're not lost. And then we give the user a single view of all their data. So it looks like it's just on one big storage device as opposed to, actually they're in lots of different places. And that makes it very easy for them to manage and very easy to scale all the data that they're creating. And the final thing I want to share with everybody is that we actually continue to sort of innovate, continue to sort of act like a startup, and so a little bit of background. In 2017, our team in Tokyo started working on some AI projects to really help some of our customers, like the Japanese government and Dentsu, who were managing large amounts of data and had some, they wanted to do more with the data, doing stuff with AI and ML. And we ran this team as a small startup inside a company, allowing them to sort of try out different things and so forth. And after about 2 years, by 2019, the team had grown to about 10 people and actually achieved meaningful customers and some meaningful revenue. So as CEO of a company, it's always difficult because we still think of ourselves as a startup, and a startup, you always have to focus. And we cannot go after, even some very good ideas. So how do you manage something like this? Do you tell the team to stop doing it? Do you keep doing it and making it something bigger? And what we decided to do was to go ahead and sort of establish a separate company that's initially fully owned by the parent Cloudian. And we have this company go out there and to raise its own funding to fund its own growth. And what that does is that allows us to get external validation of the team's own sort of business plan, because there really isn't anything else than having to sell your story to potential investors for you to quickly refine that story to something that fits with the market. So the team that was doing this solution, actually led by my co-founder Othman, went out there and pitched a number of investors, and they successfully raised $20 million in over 2 rounds, and are now part of the sort of Docomo 5G edge AI story. And that's something that we're really proud of, that we're able to continue to have this kind of innovation and continue to allow them to kind of succeed and find a model that gets us to be able to adapt and pivot and move very quickly, like startup in this new area, while we continue to focus and sort of execute in our main line of business in this sort of data management area. And now Edge Matrix is predominantly a Japanese company focused on edge AI platforms and partnering with people like Docomo, Shimizu, and Sony, and working on smart cities, smart buildings, things like that. So it's just very, very pleasurable to see the company grow and have some really strong strategic investors that are leaning in and helping us scale that business. So so with that, I will just sort of pause and turn the time back over to Richard and see if we have any questions.
Yeah. Mike, thank you very much. For people in the audience who have questions for Mike, if you would, please put your questions into chat and I'll relay them to Mike. With a group this size, it's probably the easiest way to keep things moving. Mike, to me, Cloudian is one of the most successful companies that really started in Japan and has internationalized early. I'm kind of curious, as someone who is in from the very beginning, what were the benefits and challenges to having this close US-Japan tie from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think we had a very much an advantage in that the co-founders were Japanese and US based. So we each brought in our own visions and our own culture to grow up the company. But from day one, everybody knew that this company was going to grow sort of wherever we can find places to put down our roots, right? So it's a very, yeah. So I think, for us, it was something that was kind of assumed. It was in our DNA. So it's not like there's a big step or big planning needed. And right from the beginning, like we always documented everything and built our product so that it would not take any more work for it to be a global product.
So you've got an international background, though. Would you think there was anything different because of the sort of close to Japan origins of the company, or was there anything in Japanese culture that was distinctive, or really this was just a good business that grew?
No, actually, I mean, we really benefited from starting out of Japan. There's a lot of things that I think people don't appreciate, and as a foreigner, I'm able to appreciate a lot more, right? So I think if you look at the way we built our company and our company culture, the culture around sort of honesty, around like really complete honesty with, our customers, even if we have to tell them things we don't do well. That's something that, US, I don't think they teach you in sales and marketing school, that you go out, start your presentation with all the things your product doesn't do. I mean, that's a very Japanese thing to do, not very US thing to do, but it actually works very well, because then from that moment on, you've established that kind of level of trust, which at the end of the day, when we're selling our product to these big enterprises, we are selling this trust, right? At the end of the day, it's not really about anything else. It's about trust. So
that's a really interesting point. Yeah. That at the foundation of this technology-based business is people-to-people trust.
It's what it's all about, because you can always add the next feature, and your competitors out there with slides that says all the features that you have over them will be in the next release, right? So a lot of founders think that they can sell based on a technology, and you certainly have to be competent, right? But on the other hand, what actually gets you in the door and what gets you to stay there is that level of trust. And that's something that I think, as Japanese people, a lot of times you take it for granted that is the case, but it's really strong for us. And another value that we hold very dearly is humble. And that is also a very, very Japanese way. And actually, like initially when I had some of my kind of US employees tell me that, we don't feel like a startup. What they mean is we don't feel like a US startup, which should be a little bit arrogant, should be a little bit cool, all that kind of stuff. And we're just kind of very humble, very honest, kind of people. But actually, eventually, I actually, when we got to 50 people, I actually instituted a company-wide culture training, because the culture actually became so important that we don't want to lose it as the company grew. And we actually sat down and said, no, actually humbleness and honesty are so core to who we are that we're not ashamed that we don't look cool, or we don't look like the average Silicon Valley startup. Like we actually, that is who we are. And that actually, now everybody's really proud of that. But I can tell you, there were moments when I was doubting, because I'm thinking, do I want to be like a cool kid, have our Friday afternoon beer bash is the that's the culture. I mean, we do that too, but that's not the culture, right? The culture is around who we really are as people. So
that's great. We've got several questions. Larry Greenwood has asked several questions. To put this in context, your shift from being almost half and half Japan sales and US sales to being 90% US EMEA sales and 10% Japan, does that reflect constraints in growing the business even more in Japan? If so, what kind of constraints are there?
Yeah, I think I was looking at this. I think overall we grew something like 32 times, right? And I was looking at Japan, we actually grew like 20 times. So it's not slow, right? It's more just, I think the market size is just much bigger, right? I mean, Japan as an overall economy, if you look at in kind of like a mature company, you expect Japan as a country to contribute maybe 20% around there, right? But it's not going to be a lot more. But I think it's more just the market size, because you're comparing against the whole of Europe, the whole of Middle East, the whole of United States. Yeah.
Larry also asks if Prime Minister Suga's new initiative for digitalization is having an impact there.
We're not seeing that yet, but I'm very happy to see that, because a lot of the Japanese the bigger companies are not fast and early adopters. So it's really great to see the government kind of pointing everybody in the right kind of direction, because I think it's very critical, right? That digital and data is the next platform that the world world economy is moving to. So without investing in that and being leaders in that, it's very hard to stay competitive. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Vish Mishra has an interesting question. First of all, Vish says, an amazing success story, Mike. He says, congratulations. Would you comment on how you intend to remain being a leader? Now, he mentions being single product, but you've got a critical piece of digital infrastructure there, but also besides Edge Matrix, what kind of adjacent markets might you be looking at?
Yeah, that is a really good question, right? Because as CEO, I sort of debate with this all the time, because on the one side, there's so much more to achieve in our space. So everybody says you're very small, you gotta stay focused. On the other side, like are there other things? So we are doing a lot of the adjacency expansion by getting into partnerships. We have so far acquired one company, an Italian company, about 3 years ago. And we're certainly looking to acquire more companies, because one of the things that Cloudian has done is built a large and successful enterprise sales team, which is very expensive to build, by the way. I mean, it's very hard to build that. And now that we have it, and we've sort of broken the doors down in 600 big companies, we should be able to bring in additional products that can sit on top of this data management platform to do more. So we're very much looking at acquiring in addition to all the internal stuff that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. Michikaifu says, there are a lot of Japanese tech companies that try to make it in the US and they're not as successful as you are. So why do you think you were successful? What are the reasons? And what are the
That
things
one's
they're
really
missing?
hard, Michi, and that is a great question. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, look, I mean, I don't even think of ourselves as, as really successful. I mean, we feel like we're fighting every day, but yeah, I mean, you look back, yeah, we've done a lot. I think a big part of it is that, that kind of global mindedness and understanding that it's gonna really, change your company. I talk to lots of different Japanese founders of companies that want to expand in the US, and they see it as a project. And I sort of always tell them, no, you need to kind of think about this as, like it's going to transform the company. So you are going to probably have to come here in the US. It's like, if I want to grow in Japan, the best thing is to have to be there on the ground. So, you are going to either have to come here or you're going to have someone to run it for you that you sort of rely on them enough to be your true partner, not just someone that works under you, right? I mean, and if that person may end up, because the market here is actually bigger, right? So eventually your company is going to be really different. So it's actually a very hard kind of answer. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get a lot more revenue. It's actually you're going to do this, and it's going to change your company in a way that you may not like. It's not as comfortable anymore. The company culture is going to change.
Mike, can I ask you a follow-up question on that from me?
Yeah.
How has your job changed in the last 6 years?
Well, I can say that the most obvious thing that's changed is I've gotten a lot more help. So I mean, six years ago, I had just brought in my head of sales, so that's great. I don't have to do sales anymore. But I was, I was a company CFO, so I was approving all our expenses and all our, all our discounts and all this stuff, right? I was the, head of legal, right? All the NDAs came to me. But now I have a full sort of fledged team with CFOs and head of sales and head of marketing and so forth. And I would say one of the big things I learned about this is don't go out and hire a bunch of people with big titles immediately, even if you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I really don't. I'm not a marketing guy. I'm not a sales guy. I had to learn all this stuff. But there is a thing about kind of, getting advice from smart people. And then if you hire people too early, what happens is as the company grows, these people you may have to actually replace. And it's very difficult to have to do that. So if you can still grow, but hire them a little later, you tend to get people that are much more seasoned and much more able to contribute and be able to take the company all the way. So I've built a team under me that really has stayed sort of constant, and we just added one person every sort of couple of years, right? That we've added one person. They're all very senior, and now as I kind of plan to take the company towards an IPO, I look at my team, and I feel like I don't really have to exchange anybody out, because that's a team that are so seasoned that they can handle that level of scale. So yeah, okay. I've gone from managing lots of daily things to mainly kind of looking at charts and answering my email every day. So yeah.
Okay. We've got a great question from Michael Fletcher. Michael asked, you mentioned NTT was your initial customer. I assume that had a big impact in validating the company. How did you manage to convince others in those early days to work with you, since it's always hard as a startup to demonstrate capability to deliver?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially like I mentioned, you're selling long-term trust, you're keeping people's data, right? So, I mean, I look back, I mean, I don't want to sort of minimize this at all. I don't want to say, oh, we somehow figured this out. I mean, this is a hard grind, right? I mean, I think, let's see, back in 2015, and that was, the company's been around for three years. We had something like 30 customers at that time, right? I think we didn't get to our first 100 customers until probably 6 or 7 years into the company. And then we added 150 customers in the last 12 months, right? So that the growth is completely exponential, and the first ones are so hard. And you have to use like all your friendships, history. Now the thing about like NTT, there was really two factors. One was my previous company made mobile messaging systems, and NTT Docomo has been one of our customers for many years. So we were not a bunch of brand new kids on the block that's starting a company when it's hot, right? I mean, everybody knew who we were. They knew we were very good people. We supported the product and so on and so forth. The other thing that happened was 2011, the Japanese big earthquake. That really caused NTT to think about sort of distributed data, right? The need to have data sit in sort of different data centers and so forth. And just by kind of sheer luck, we announced, like, we used to be a mobile messaging company. The day we chose to announce that we had a distributed storage company was March 11th of 2011. And we announced several hours before the big quake hit. And about 2 weeks later, I was summoned to go in to meet the CEO of NTT Docomo, Yamada-san at the time. And that kind of started the whole kind of relationship to a totally different level, because suddenly, because of the earthquake, they saw sort of distributed storage, distributed data storage became a very strategic item for the NTT group, right?
Okay. I have a question from Shujiro Matsusaka, who asks, would you explain your strength in ransomware protection?
Yeah, so we a couple years ago we built this capability called object lock for the U.S. government, for the U.S. Defense Department. So as you can imagine, if you're storing some data as long-term evidence or whatever, you have to make sure that even if somebody has complete access to your system, they should not be able to modify the data. And that's especially we saw in the Snowden case, where he's somebody on the inside who had access. So we built this feature for the U.S. military called in object lock, that essentially it's a whole system that means that even if you have super user access, you're not able to modify the data. And I would love to call this as great planning, but actually it was just kind of a little bit luck that when this whole attacks from ransomware started coming because of COVID, we happen to have the most reliable, most secure, most certified platform to store your data, to make sure that not only users, but the ransomware is not able to go in there and sort of modify the data, because the way the ransomware works is that it comes in and it encrypts all your data. So that means it has to overwrite your data. But any data that you have stored on us, it's basically military grade, that it's not going to be modifiable, even if there was ransomware. So we love hearing stories of the customers who were attacked and they were able to recover, or they were able to withstand the attack because of our software. So it's a capability called object lock, but there's a whole kind of bunch of technology that sort of underlies that.
Okay, that's great. So for everyone, I'm afraid we're about to run out of time. I'm very happy to say that in our second half of this program that will happen next week at this same time, Mike has agreed to host a breakout room and can answer more questions and talk with you more in a smaller setting in this program next week. So for now, I'm kind of going to ask one question at the end, and this is from John Thomas. What kind of advice would you give to new entrepreneurs now?
Well, I have a lot of advice, but I think the one that comes to mind the most is actually just be yourself. I think as part of my sort of growing up into the role, you always look for like, oh, here's what a CEO should look like. Here's what a successful tech leader should look like. And you spend a lot of your younger years trying to imitate. But actually, what I've learned actually through some of my team is people like me and want to be, you know, led by me in just the way I am. All the things that I think I should be better at, they just really accept that. But that also brings in all the things I'm really strong at. So I would say if you're starting a company, you know, right now, just understand that, you know, this is, you know, the beginning of a new journey. It's the end of another journey in a way, but it's, you know, really beginning a new one. But you really, the best thing you can do is remain true to yourself and, you know, play to your strengths and don't worry about, you know, trying to imitate anybody else. You know, so.
Mike, thank you very much. That's great advice for all of us, no matter what field we're an entrepreneur in. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks very much for a great presentation today. Congratulations to Claudia, and we look forward to seeing what will happen further in the future.
All right, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate everybody here giving me this an opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thanks again. The next segment in our program is a discussion by one of our sponsors. And these are actually highly informative. And I'm delighted that I can introduce Ms. Nancy Yamaguchi, who is a partner at Morgan Lewis and Blackius, LLP. And they are a Series A sponsor of the Innovation Awards. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. And let me share my screen. Can everybody see that? Okay, great. So as Richard mentioned, I'm Nancy Yamaguchi. I am a partner in the Corporate Business Transactions Practice Group at the law firm of Morgan Lewis here in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. I focus on cross-border mergers and acquisitions, especially between the US and Japan, but more recently also involving China, Taiwan, Singapore, Germany, and the UK. Together with my partners, I also advise on IP portfolio development, IP litigation, labor and employment, tax, and transfer pricing. So Morgan Lewis is truly an international law firm. We have 31 offices across 17 time zones and 2,000 and plus lawyers. We are a full service law firm ranging anything from antitrust to fund formation to telecom and structured transactions and employee benefits. We are divided into different industry sectors so that we can provide advice to industry-focused clients on their industry and business. We win all kinds of awards for client service and accolades. We are considered one of the top and elite law firms in the US. Since we have an exceptionally accomplished group of awardees this year, and to ensure their success in the US and beyond, I thought I would provide a highly abridged version of a training seminar that I gave to our clients in Japan a few years ago, which was a big hit because companies like to learn from other people's mistakes rather than making the mistake on their own. So business success in Silicon Valley revolves around three fundamental pillars. First, corporate finance, the ability to raise capital without ceding managerial control to fund your business operations and technology development. Second, intellectual property, how to protect your valuable technology monetize that and to enforce your intellectual property rights, both defensively as well as offensively. Third, key employees and talent. How to attract and retain talent and prevent them from departing to your competitor with all of your know-how. Or, sometimes frequently in Silicon Valley, they will start their own business that can end up competing against you. So, due to the lack of time for my presentation today, I will skip over these detailed discussions regarding typical mistakes from a legal perspective that Japanese technology companies make here in Silicon Valley. But suffice it to say that I've seen over and over again and continue to see companies fall into these traps for the unwary. So just from a high level, Japanese technology companies operating internationally face several challenges giving rise to legal quandary. First, Japanese companies tend to be risk averse, especially compared to their Silicon Valley brethren who embrace and welcome risk. And there's legal reasons behind this, which I will touch upon a little bit later. Also, Japanese companies tend to operate through consensus management and decision-making process, which is thorough and measured, but it could be on the slow side. Third, although Japanese companies have attained world-class technological superiority, but they are reluctant and passive in enforcing their intellectual property rights. Next, Japanese companies tend to shy away from contentious contract negotiations and tend to hastily compromise, accepting onerous terms that could haunt them later on. And of course, there's issues around adequate and effective employee communications and selection of competent and trustworthy advisors. I know Mike talked a lot about trust, which is also very key in advisor selection. So what are the solutions, best practices to overcome these legal challenges? First, it is very important to wield managerial authority and exercise business judgment under Delaware Corporations Law, which is the most well-developed corporate law in the world that promotes reasonable risk-taking, which is a key reason why American entrepreneurs tend to embrace and take more risk than their Japanese counterparts. Also in contract drafting and negotiations, patent portfolio development and strategy, Silicon Valley style equity incentive compensation, internal as well as external marketing, all of this would contribute to an improvement of Japanese technology companies' business and operations here in Silicon Valley, not to mention litigation preparedness, which is very important, and selection of trusted advisors in specialized areas of support throughout your corporate life cycle. With that, I hope that everyone enjoys this wonderful conference and has gained some kernels of wisdom and insight in achieving and maintaining business success in Silicon Valley and around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. And let me thank you for your service on the Innovation Advisory Council and also for volunteering in mentoring sessions for several years now. I've been able to be in your sessions as a moderator, and I've really appreciate the good advice you've given to our companies. So everyone, we are taking a 10-minute break from this point. It is 20 after the hour, and so we will resume at 32 after the hour. So please take a look at some of our exhibits during break, refresh your coffee or get another glass of wine, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
The first penguin spirit. Despite the possibility of encountering killer whales lurking in the treacherous and icy sea, the first penguin that courageously plunges into the water is referred as the first penguin. Digital Garage is a first penguin in the internet world. In 1994, we created Japan's first personal homepage. In 2000, we launched the first convenience store-based payment system. In 2005, we played a major role in Kakaku.com's listing on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. In 2008, we formed a capital and business partnership with Twitter and supported its localization in Japan. In 2010, we established Open Network Lab, Japan's first seed accelerator program that supports entrepreneurs. In 2013, we opened DG717, an incubation center in downtown San Francisco. And in 2016, we established DG Lab, an open innovation-based R&D organization. The power to tie phenomenons together as a context company comes from the background of cutting-edge efforts to form a new generation. Real and cyber, local and international, marketing and technology, present and future. We have been generating new values by connecting different cultures and ideas.
Fabit is one of the largest Japanese co-working company, founded with the goal of building a vibrant startup ecosystem and incubating innovation. Fabit is a hub for the growing startup community in Japan. We support Japanese companies expanding their business overseas and foreign companies starting business in Japan. There are 23 locations across Japan, and we also have an international location in San Francisco, Hawaii, and Philippines, and operate in Boston area under the name of Workbar. Since we aim to support startups from all angles, we provide much more than just space. We also offer a wide range of business services, including a larger event, which we invite renowned speakers and startups from all over the world as speakers, networking events, discount on branding tour and website development cost, a free job posting site, consultations with specialists, investment opportunities, exclusive SNS platform, and extensive business marketing opportunities. To adjust to the new normal after COVID-19, we Fabit take a measure to protect Fabit members and our staff and continue to make effort to improve our services. There's many opportunities and connection to take advantage of joining the Fabit. We welcome you anytime, and we are hoping working with you. Thank you.
JETRO is a nonprofit organization that provides business support services to U.S. companies expanding to Japan and Japanese businesses expanding abroad. Established in 1958 by the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, JETRO has over 100 offices around the world in over 50 countries. As a U.S. business, you can benefit from our half-century history, locations in 47 prefectures, and relationships with local communities. But why come to Japan to begin with? The region offers a safe and stable infrastructure, pro-business environment, and ranks as the third largest GDP on the planet. Also, Tokyo Yokohama is the #1 innovation hub in the world. JETRO can help you with all stages of market entry, from incorporation to visa applications to legal regulations and more. We also offer free office spaces in major cities in Japan. In short, we're a one-stop shop for for establishing or expanding your business in Japan. JETRO also strives to connect innovative Japanese startups with potential partners and investors in the US. Our events and programs enable Japanese businesses to meet and work with American investors and collaborators. It's a win-win for both countries. We'll connect you with the most exciting ideas, cutting-edge tech, and investment opportunities Japan has to offer. Looking for business opportunities with Japan? Interested in Japanese innovation? Talk to JETRO first.
Rakunest is a workplace solution provided by Rakuten USA, located in the heart of Silicon Valley. Combining office space, amenities including meals, and community support, Rakunest's mission is to empower all companies to succeed in Silicon Valley. This past year, while the office space was temporarily closed due to unprecedented world events, Rakunest has responded with innovation and creativity in the face of adversity. Undeterred in the mission, Rakunest has launched the Digital Rakunest, a premier online monthly membership service. This initiative combines remote working support with the latest information covering the tech trends, startup information, and networking opportunities. US news updates, industry reports, exclusive webinars, and virtual happy hours all serve to build connections and foster a sense of community.
発展はもちろんジャパンブランドの復権ということに貢献できればと思っています。
Rakunest has some great amenities for a shared workspace. There's plenty of room, great environment, and excellent beverages and snacks.
いろんなテナントさんが入られて、いろいろと情報共有ができるという場所としては、すごいいい場所だと思います。
As Rakunest safely opens back up to an in-person environment, the sense of community has only continued to flourish. Whether it's the full-service facilities, which offer private rooms, cubicles, and meeting rooms, Rakunest benefits other office setups including Wi-Fi, 24/7 security, and daily lunch served in the Rakuten cafeteria. Come and find out why so many Japanese companies choose to call Rakunest home.
Okay, so I hope everyone had a good break. We can resume our program at this point. Thanks very much to our exhibitor sponsors, and hope you found the information on their services and new products interesting. We're moving to the presentation of the SunBridge Emerging Leader Awards. And I'll never forget the day, a little over 12 years ago, when John Thomas, on behalf of the Japan Society, and Alan Miner, who was really kind of the heart and soul behind the whole idea of an awards program, came into my office at Stanford and started talking about, we need to do this. Well, I think it is a tribute to a lot of people's hard work that Alan has decided to sponsor the SunBridge Emerging Leader Award, be title sponsor of this award. So I'm very happy to turn over the podium to Alan at this point and ask him to tell a little bit about these awards and to present the award plaques to the CEOs of our awardee companies this year. Alan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. As you said, it has been a long time since we started in this journey, and I never imagined when you and I and John and a few of our other friends sat down early on to figure out how to pull this together and the various iterations that the awards went through over the years, that we'd still be doing it 12 years later. Even more so, it's remarkable the number of impressive companies, both from Japan and from the United States, that we have identified as outstanding companies deserving this award. We have at times toyed with World Changer Awards and Best Entrepreneurship Awards for interesting innovations coming out of large companies. But in the spirit of Silicon Valley, and I think perhaps partly the biases and interests of the committee, we've always found ourselves most interested in the startups that were still young, still growing very fast, doing exciting, surprising things that truly deserve or potentially deserve the label of leaders. And looking back on Twitter and Tesla, Line, Uglena, many of the past award winners. When we identified them, I think it's fair to say that their path to leadership was not entirely assured. They were still at a stage where they were growing, they were still addressing challenges, and yet they have all of them become leaders in their spheres. Most of all, I'd like to thank Richard. Well, first I need to thank John for pushing me to think about this and work on it, and his deep commitment to the ongoing mission of the Japan Society to bring Japan and the US closer in many ways, and his insight to see that a program on innovation, a program that reflects the proximity of the Northern California Japan Society to the innovation hotbed that is Silicon Valley, that the society needed to be something beyond politics, beyond arts and culture, that really reflects our location in Silicon Valley. So it was definitely John who saw the need for that and has remained an active leader of the Japan Society all these many years, and helped to steer and drive and see that this program gets the funding that it needs, and sees that over time we continue to evolve the committee, looking at the awards, and have an organization that can sustain. And I think it was only maybe 3 or 4 years into it when I asked Richard if he would succeed me as the chairman of the awards. And Richard, I didn't expect you to keep doing it this long. You've certainly served far longer than most chairmen of a volunteer organization like this would do. don't cover your eyes and turn around on me. But his sustained leadership of the process and keeping everything moving forward has also been key. And I'm at a point now where I get to participate primarily as a philanthropist and an award presenter. And I must say, in all honesty, I don't mind this role. But thank you to all of the participants in the planning process who identify the companies each year, debate the pros and cons of the nominees, narrow it down to a final awardee from both US and Japan. Thank you to John for your leadership from the very beginning through today, and to Richard for keeping us all on task and moving forward and seeing that the awards actually do take place each summer on schedule as planned. So thank you to everyone involved. Probably what you're most interested in is hearing the awardees and seeing them. And I need a little bit of help because, as Richard knows, I don't read my email. So
our first award is going to go to Mr. Othman Laraki, who is the founder and CEO of the US SunBridge Emerging Leader Award winner, Color.
Great. Okay, thank you, Richard. So it gives me great pleasure to present the SunBridge, I want to call, let me call it by its proper name, the Japan Society of Northern California Innovation Awards, Emerging Leader USA for 2021 to Color. Congratulations, and from here in Sundance, Utah, to you there in California, congratulations, Mr. Othman.
Well, Alan, thank you. I'll pull that right out of the camera.
Lovely.
I hope that was smooth enough in the Zoom world transfer. But thank you very much for the introduction and the privilege and honor of this award.
We're expecting you to change the world and lead your field, just as Tesla and Twitter and many previous award winners have done before you. So we have great expectations for your continued success.
No, thank you, and I hope we are deserving of the award and the opportunity to have the impact on public health, and not only in the U.S. but more broadly. So thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Othman. And our award winners will be joining us for a panel discussion as soon as we present both awards. So the next
I always like to hear the panel discussion first, so that I could make some comments that are a little more relevant to the company, but that's okay. I'll look forward to hearing the comments hereafter.
So the next award is going to go to Mr. Chris Blackerby, who is the group COO of Astroscale.
Yep. Well, I'm going to add a little bit of color before presenting the award. Those involved in this program and those who are interested in the startup scene in Japan may be well aware that the space vehicle launch sector with SpaceX and Blue Horizon is quite active in the United States, but a lot of innovation in the satellites, communications, in what we do with space or in space. There's a great amount of startup activity in the space sector in Japan. And we've had some past companies in our program in the featured startups program, but I think this is the first time that we've presented an Emerging Leader Award to one of the many startups in the space in Japan. So to Astroscale, congratulations. We hope that you prove us right by leading your peers in Japan and impacting the world of not necessarily space exploration, but how we engage with space as society. And that you set a great example for your many, many peers in Japan. And congratulations to Astroscale, the winner of the Japan Society of Northern California Emerging Leader Award for Japan 2021. Congratulations.
I will take that off your hands, Alan. Thank you. It's an honor to receive it, and we have a long history with the group, and a thank you to the sponsors, to Akiyama-san yourself, Alan and SunBridge, and to Richard, who I started at Astroscale in August of 2017. And only 2 months later, I spoke at a class on the invitation of Richard. And as Richard will remember, it was 2 days after our first launch, which was on a rocket that failed. So the Japan Society and Richard have been with us from some of our lower points when we had to climb back up from a difficult situation to where we are now. So we appreciate the incredible ongoing support and the support for innovation and entrepreneurship. And so I look forward to talking more during the roundtable session coming up. So thank you.
Best of luck on your journey.
Thank you,
Chris. And I'm delighted that now we can have all of our panel, both of our winners and Alan, join us for a discussion of the innovation that's involved in these companies. I'd like to start, we'll go in alphabetical order. So I'll ask Chris to speak first. Tell us a little bit more about Astroscale. We didn't really introduce the company before we gave the award. We wanted to get the plaque out of the way first. So tell us more about Astroscale and your innovation story.
Sure thing. Let me share my screen and give you, I don't want to talk too much on the slides, but I will give some background of the company. I really would like to take more time for the Q&A. And what I didn't do earlier, I also want to congratulate Othman and his team at Color for this award. It's great to share it with you. So nice to have you here too. So Astroscale, we are a global company that is solving a global problem. We are when I last was there, we actually received one of the Emerging Leader Awards 3 years ago, and at that time, I came to Northern California to participate in person, of course. We had about 35, 40 people in a couple offices around the world. We've grown since then. We now have over 200 people around the world in 5 offices, steadily expanding our global footprint from Singapore to Japan, to the UK, to the US, and most recently last year, an acquisition of a company in Israel. We dollars and of space debris, of space utilization, and making sure it is sustainable and that we can continue to benefit from the assets we have in orbit. So right now, space is crowded. There's a lot of trash up there. There's a lot of risk to the satellites that are providing data to us on a daily basis. We receive so much information. We receive so much benefit from satellites in orbit, and they are constantly at risk from pieces of debris. Right now, there's 25 to 30,000 objects larger than 10 centimeters in orbit, and only 3,200, probably a little bit more, thanks to OneWeb and SpaceX launches, are active satellites. And the risk here is that a collision from a piece of debris could hit a satellite, and then that creates many more pieces of debris, and it becomes a cascading exponential problem, which is irreversible. It's much easier to clean up a large piece of debris and reduce the risk than it is to clean up 100 smaller pieces of debris. And each one of those smaller pieces of debris is another risk to another satellite, which is a risk to services we get on Earth, which is a risk to company balance sheets, which is risk really to the global economy. And I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying that. I have 2 different orbital planes here on the screen. We get different data from both of these orbits. One is low Earth orbit, which is close to the Earth. One is geostationary orbit, which is farther away, where the satellites are mapped to the rotation of the Earth. But we are involved in both. And so when we think about where we're trying to innovate and make changes, we're trying to help achieve sustainability in both the low Earth orbit and the geo orbit. It's already crowded. It's getting more crowded. We see that the number of objects in space has been steadily growing since Sputnik launched in 1957, and it's getting even more so now. So we talk about how many more satellites are going to be launched. the number is incredible, in the tens of thousands over the next several years that we're looking at. So we need to address this problem now. It's the kind of thing that if we don't address it now, it's a prevention before the cure situation. And if we don't address it now, addressing the cure is going to be a lot more difficult. So what we need to do is really, it's a space traffic management, the same way that there's road traffic management, that we have regulations and laws in place, best practices for driving on the road. We need the same thing for driving on the orbital highway. The same way we have road networking and monitoring operations to tell us where traffic is and where to go and how to go, we need that same kind of awareness in orbit. And the same way that when a car breaks down on the highway, we have someone come and fix it or refuel it or get it out of the way, we need the same kind of thing in orbit. Our orbital highways are another natural resource that we rely on. If we ignore them and we don't put in place these rules, this monitoring, this servicing, we're gonna suffer. Society will suffer, economies will suffer, and we need to take care of that now. So what we are trying to do is get away from this throwaway culture. And that's, that's actually a really common theme in the space sector these days. You see what companies like SpaceX are doing with reusability, using something and then never using it again. Using it once and then throwing it away is inefficient. It's environmentally inefficient. It's economically inefficient. It's something that we need to get away from. And in the space sector, we haven't done that. We've been a throwaway culture. We've done R&D, we've assembled things, we've launched them, we've operated them, and then they're done. We want to move on to a servicing culture where we're able to remove things that are a threat. We're able to repair satellites that need repairing and can continue to provide service. And to do all of this, there's a lot that we need to do to be innovative. We can't just develop a new technology. We need to lower the costs of manufacturing, which is tough in the space sector because the idea of mass production is kind of difficult. Volume production on satellites is a lot smaller than it is in most sectors. So we need, how do we lower the costs without having to go toward this, this volume production savings that other industries can benefit from? How do we implement supportive regulations? I use that road analogy, but on roads, we have an overarching authority to take care of it, the police or the national or local authorities. That doesn't really exist in space. And so we need to think about how we work together to implement supportive regulations. Improve incentive structures. So how can we be innovative in thinking about improving incentives for companies to actually take advantage of these services, whether it's insurance, whether it's various types of tax incentives for removing debris. We need to find those ways to incentivize better use of this orbital environment. Highlight the risks to the companies. We are all, humanity is notorious at sometimes not seeing risks that are there and then not recognizing them until it's too late. And so we need to highlight those and articulate the value to the customer. So this innovative aspect, we see it as being bigger than technology. It's in a lot of areas of business. On the technology side, though, what we're trying to do is we have 4 different business lines, and I'll touch on these really quickly, all of which are related to removal of debris and servicing of satellites. So we're talking about, from the left, the end of life services is grabbing a satellite that has been prepared before it launches to be removed. So we're proposing putting a docking plate on satellites that has a ferromagnetic material. Satellite, we can go up and grab it and pull it out of the way. That makes it cheaper for us to design and develop. It makes it easier for us to predict what we're going to need. If a certain satellite constellation has 200 satellites with this docking plate on it, we know we can estimate how many servicing satellites we're going to need to go grab out certain numbers. And we can build a capture mechanism that can fit those. Active debris removal, going up and grabbing satellites that are already in orbit that don't have that docking mechanism. So we need to develop a robotic structure to grab onto and remove those satellites. In situ SSA, space situational awareness, observing orbital environments and observing satellites in orbit to see what the orbit is like and what the certain clients are like. And then the most recent thing we've added just last year is a life extension service. So this is going up to the higher altitudes primarily in the geo orbit and repairing satellites. A lot of satellites up there are much more expensive to launch. If we can extend the life just a few years of those satellites, there's a very high value for clients to be able to do that rather than building and launching another several $100 million satellite. And so all of these areas that we're working on have very similar technology overlaps. We all need to learn, learn how to go from a far range approach to a near range approach to an object. We need to diagnose it with the proper cameras. We need to capture it, and we need to either fix it or remove it or keep it stable. So, but it all has a lot of overlapping technologies that we're working on in all of our offices. And we're working on aspects of each of these missions that, of course, I could go into, but I won't because of time. The one I will mention is our satellite that's in orbit right now, which is end-of-life services by astroscale demonstration. This was designed, built in our clean room here in Tokyo with the assistance of our offices around the world. We are monitoring the operations of the satellite right now from an operations center in the UK. We are truly international. We have a growing US office that is helping on this mission with various aspects of licensing. And it's also helping us to prepare for our future missions, particularly with the servicing. And this was launched successfully, Richard, a few months ago. So unlike our first one, which was not successfully launched by the launch vehicle, this was a successful launch. It is in orbit right now, and we'll be doing some demonstrations of these capabilities to capture a piece of debris later this summer and throughout this year. So there'll be updates coming up. Watch this space, no pun intended. So I will close there and turn it over to Alan and Othman and stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'll say that just for everybody, if you do have questions for Othman or for Chris, please put into chat and I'll lay them, assuming that we have a little bit of time at the end. I've got a couple of questions for you, but first to ask Othman, tell us about color, which those of us here in the Bay Area especially have more than likely had some experience with.
Well, thank you for, and first of all, Chris, thank you for both for the congratulations and also walking through the amazing work that you're doing. I think our work will feel literally much more pedestrian, but very impressed with what you and your team have achieved. Let me project. I will just kind of walk through a few slides to provide a little bit of background on color. So as Richard mentioned, probably for a number of folks who live in the Bay Area, in particular over the last year, they likely will have, there's a reasonable chance that you have interacted with some of Color's products and services. We are a direct-to-population healthcare delivery company. Our history actually started off initially in the genetics and preventative care space, where we were working on early cancer detection and cardiovascular disease detection, but focusing on very large populations. What happened over the last few years is that we transformed the company into becoming a much more broad healthcare delivery company that is focusing on these kind of like broad population applications when we realized that there are major gaps in terms of oftentimes in healthcare and as well as in many other, I think, technology fields. As technologists, we get very excited about the challenges of science and technology. And we think oftentimes those are the biggest hurdles. Whereas oftentimes, like one of the biggest functions of technology, I think, ends up being when we use it as a way to solve massive logistical challenges and problems, and using technology as a mechanism to increase access. And I think that's one of the biggest roles that technology has in healthcare, and that's really what Color is focused on. So we've been around for about almost 8 years. We're about 600 people based in the Bay Area, just north. We're just south of San Francisco. So we're next to the San Francisco airport. So the framework for how we approach the world and how we look at healthcare and the opportunity to have an impact is that when you zoom out, healthcare, especially in the US, but I think it's actually even globally, most of when we think about healthcare systems and healthcare infrastructure, they've generally been designed to manage acute care. Like they're optimized around, when we think about big healthcare, we think about cancer treatment. We think about saving someone from a heart attack and so on. But we use that same infrastructure that we use to deal with very big events like cancer treatment to try to do very basic and pedestrian things that are normally public health applications, whether it's COVID testing or vaccines or early detection of diabetes, mammographies, all these things that actually are not very individually heavy healthcare applications, but where the challenge is really about scalability and access. And the side effect of that is that we make some of these services where we want to maximize utilization, we make them scarce because they're difficult, they're put through a difficult channel, if you will. And really that's what Color is working on solving, is we use software and technology, as well as a different kind of business model and model of access of basic health services to take things that are like very lightweight applications of healthcare and distribute them to the edge, to the last mile. So how do you turn every workplace, every university, every school into a place where you can do basic healthcare? If you want to vaccinate children at scale, the school system is where you can do that. Your workplace is one of the most effective aggregations of people to be able to deliver basic health services. And so that's kind of the infrastructure that Color's been building, is around building the ability to deliver in an asset-light way basic health services, but at massive scale. Today, our kind of main applications are effectively, ones that would not be surprising, but where on one hand, we run some of the largest COVID surveillance testing programs in the country. We did that across major universities like Stanford, Harvard, and so on. Major employers, so national employers across all 50 states. Large government-sponsored programs. So, for example, Color is running the school testing program for the state of California. So that's across the entire public school system. So we run these kind of large public testing programs. We run also laboratory infrastructure, where it is both a lab that we run, as well as infrastructure around other laboratories across the country. And then finally, we also, again, still in the COVID world, we are also running large-scale vaccine administration infrastructure, where, for example, for the state of Massachusetts, Color provides the entire digital infrastructure for administering vaccines. We don't necessarily run all the sites ourselves, but we provide kind of the backbone infrastructure for the delivery and all the different contexts where the state rolls out these services. And I mentioned a number of these, but we work across a pretty broad range of institutions, but the basic way to think about how Color works is that in general, we think of the main institutions that are delivering healthcare as being insurance companies and health systems. But in practice, the real buyers of healthcare are big employers, governments, universities, and so on. They're the ones who are actually the sponsors of these populations. And so what Color does is that we work directly with the actual sponsors to deliver these scaled programs. And I mentioned a number of these, but one of the things that's been for us a very important evolution that started actually pre-COVID, but dramatically got accelerated over the last year, is the realization about this kind of the way you deliver things to broad populations is to meet people where their lives actually exist. If you want to serve, especially underserved communities, for example, in the US, about 60% of Americans are hourly workers. When you ask someone to come to the doctor, come to the health system to receive basic care, it is in direct competition with their income, with their kind of daily lives and so on. And the realization that the way in which we can, make these services actually accessible is to show up in people's lives. And again, so that's where we talk about schools, the prison system, literally taking healthcare to where people actually are on a day-to-day basis. That's how you can serve people for non-acute events. So our evolution that started off in this kind of, it's been many. It's always great to hear kind of different stories of different companies, because I think when we look back, the thread of history looks linear, right? Because there's a single thread. But when you look forward, it's this branching factor that, is really hard to guess ahead of time. But, we started off in this kind of like very deep, narrow application, but that had a broad aperture in some sense of like the population we wanted to serve. And that led us to building this infrastructure that just from a timing standpoint ended up coinciding with the COVID crisis. And that's what led us to realizing that there's a much, much broader application for this delivery system that we built that, initially we're using for testing, then vaccines. And now that's being transitioned over to long-term public health and population health services like, vaccines beyond COVID, like testing outside of COVID and so on. And so that's been kind of the evolution over the last few years. And I think one of the big like threshold moments that's happened for people over this last year has been this realization that, we as a society, we were forced to take healthcare to people. And I don't think that's ever going to change back. Like, I think people now have a much bigger expectation of being able to receive care services, as part of their lives, as opposed to needing to go to them. So, and I think it's one of the most important things that can happen for public health. So that's kind of a quick overview of Color. Happy to take any questions about what we do or healthcare in general. It's a very dynamic and interesting space right now. And so happy to kind of talk about it as much as anyone would like.
Othman, thank you so much. This is really, both companies are incredibly inspiring. I've got some things that I want to ask, but I do want to give the podium to Alan first. And Alan, now that you've seen the company presentations, what kind of comments or questions would you like to ask or say? Did we lose Alan? So let me go ahead and ask my first question. Both of companies have absolutely, wonderfully clear missions, very important missions. And you've come up with really creative, innovative ways to solve the problems. And I think that the stories are so clear and easy to understand, and yet the performance is so difficult. Both of the companies really have to build a value network of partners that involve both government entities as well as major private sector entities. Let me ask both of you in turn, how are you able to get these major enterprises to accept your vision? So Othman, let me ask you first, how did you get the public health providers and how did you get the major universities and the other kind of enterprises to agree to bring these health services to the people?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in general, especially with industry like healthcare, where it's, and I think Chris's experience is probably very similar, where it's not like an open market, where it's like, I think as an engineer, or as like someone who kind of, if you work in a consumer space, your expectation is of an efficient market where it's like, okay, if I have a better product, the market will show up and magically buy it if it's better and cheaper. I think these markets that are incredibly non-liquid, if you will, like you mentioned, I think one of the most challenging and important things is to figure out how to thread into the industry and into the market. I mean, in our case, it turned out that one of the most important things that was part of our DNA as a team and as a company was that we have a very deep scientific basis, and where from even though, for example, there are a lot of companies that do testing and so on, one thing that's been very unique about Color is that we've been very full stack all the way to building our own chemistry, our own robotics, and so on from early on, and collaborating with some of the top world scientists in every one of the fields that we work in. That for us has been actually one of the biggest sources of a competitive advantage in terms of building a better product, but also a way to gain legitimacy, to be able to effectively punch above our weight. And so I think, and these are things where it's kind of, there's a kind of a cumulative effect where, the first one is infinitely more difficult than the next, and so on. And so, in all of these, it's been kind of a process of building trust early, and growing that trust with these large institutions like, the California Department of Public Health. Start off very small, similar with our work with NIH. We start off very small and then built from there. And that's been kind of for us the most effective way to do that.
Okay, thanks. Chris, what would you say on that?
Yeah, like Othman says, we're a startup company in a startup industry. We certainly don't like to take the easy road when we're talking about being a startup company in an industry or an ecosystem that is still not clear. And that is tough. It's one thing when you can be a startup company building a new computer or a new way to sell shoes. People are going to still buy shoes. You're just building the new way to innovate on that. We're trying to not only build this service, but also build this industry. And so that is a major challenge. And so we see that there has to be a multi-pronged approach to bringing constituencies on board. It's hard to go direct to commercial and say immediately you need this service, and they're gonna say, well, no one's forcing me to do it, and the risk of a collision is still pretty low, even though the impact's high. Okay, I'm willing to roll the dice and take that risk, but by doing that, you're putting the entire environment that we're all reliant on at risk. There's a threat to all of us. So it's this holistic recognition of what the issue is something that we are trying to champion and to take forward. And so it means that we go, of course, not just to the commercial provider who we would see as the customer, who of course is important, and that's primary to say, here's what we can offer you. But we also need to go to the regulator, both the domestic, state operators, and say, okay, there has to be some kind of regulatory regime that gets put in place, or some kind of policy that gets put in place to incentivize or carrot and stick, get people to start recognizing that there needs to be some activity taken. And then we go to others, we go to academia to spread the word and to let people know this issue is out there and it needs attention. We go to investors, obviously, and say, here is a problem that there is going to be a market here. It's not a question of if there will. I mean, there will be. It's a question of when. And we recognize that we're still at the front edge of this. But it's going to happen. And so we just need to gather a constituency base that is informed and aware and ready to take action on what we see is a globally impactful problem. And we see it changing in the positive way. I mean, we see that there's much more recognition now, even than when I started 4 years ago, when the company started 8 years ago. There's a real recognition that this is an issue. But what we don't want is continuing to see that it's a problem, but not take action. And that's why we need governments, and that's why we need companies to recognize that this is in their best interest, and it's in the interest of society to start addressing this. So it is tough, but we think it just takes a multi-pronged approach to raising awareness and taking action.
Thank you. Alan, so 3 things on the table. First of all, your comments about scaling, the way that these companies have scaled in difficult environments. Second, general comments about these companies and their innovation stories. Mm-hmm. And third, any questions you would like to ask?
Well, I'm curious for both of them about their competitive landscape. For Axel Space internationally, obviously there are great space-related scientists and researchers in Japan, to the extent that you're working on repair robotics technology that's available in Japan. But I would expect, because space debris is a potentially serious problem that has been getting attention in the space field for some time, that you may have 1 or 2 serious competitive rivals in the startup scene or more established industries in the States. So I'm curious about your competitive landscape. And for color, the thing that really occurs to me, and I'm remembering when we gave the award to Twitter, and we were quite impressed with how useful that tool was during the disaster of the earthquakes in Tohoku region in 2011. And certainly within Japan, that was sort of a benchmark moment for Twitter, that showed their usefulness in society and accelerated adoption. And I'm curious for color, how different you think the trajectory of the company might have been had we not had to deal with the COVID crisis last year. How much acceleration in both the sense of mission within the company, in adoption, some mRNA technologies were introduced on an emergency basis. It may have taken many, many more years for those technologies to be introduced into the medical sphere without it. And so I'm curious, for your particular business model, how big of a boost or how critical a turning point the COVID crisis was last year?
Why don't we go with Othman first about that last question? We'll work backwards.
So one interesting coincidence or factoid is that I was actually vice president of product at Twitter during that time.
So you know how to take advantage of a crisis.
I clearly remember living through that, and it was interesting. I mean, remembering some of those threshold moments when, whether it was that or the Arab Spring, or like where there are moments in time that are impossible to synthesize, but when the time comes, you're never perfectly ready for it, but you have to be ready for it. And in some ways, that is actually how I felt about the COVID crisis last year. I mean, first of all, to answer your top level question, I think it would have taken many years, if ever, to catalyze this type of acceleration. I think one of the other things that also happened as a side effect of all of us collectively as a society living through the COVID crisis is that public health problems are so endemic and diffuse in our lives that it's really hard to reason about them, right? When you think about basic health services access in underprivileged areas in Oakland, we think there's so many things that conflate what comes into that we can never, it's really hard to reason about them in a single mind frame, if you will. And I think what COVID did is that it forced all of that into a narrow enough frame that we can actually be specific. It's West Oakland is having an outbreak and we need to test people and then get them vaccinated. How do we do that? And it focuses that problem in a way that, and we have to do it, right? And as an example there, realizing that literally, so we launched, for example, with West Oakland in June of last year, multiple months into the pandemic. In the first day that we launched a COVID testing site with the community, we tested more people than had been tested since the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow.
And you realize the impact of the exponential drop-off out of inconvenience when people need to go and find something. And so, and I think that us, the global us, being forced to experience that need as well as potential solutions to it, I think is a big shift in how people think about healthcare and healthcare delivery and what the actual problems are. We pulled off a moon landing style endeavor by getting vaccines developed in under a year, but then couldn't deliver them into people's arms. And that's a logistics problem. And realizing that we can use technology to really solve these problems, I think was very important for everyone. And I think transformed a little bit how we think about the role of technology in healthcare and how we healthcare is not about, getting doctors to turn every single crank. It's about, making basic healthcare policies and protocols accessible to massive amounts of people very efficiently. I think that would have been very difficult, I think, to articulate to people without this experience. So I think it ended up being an incredibly important, I think, social transformation, for the industry, but also more broadly, I think.
Thanks.
So I'm glad that you were able to respond as quickly and well as you did.
So Chris, about the competitive landscape, your problem is you have to raise vast amounts without even having demonstrated a whole lot. I mean, you've got your first satellite up in orbit now, but how do you deal with competition? What's it like in your sector?
So I'll address that question from Alan, which is a good one, and then your follow-up, Richard. I'd also like to tie back into some things Othman was saying, because I do think we need to tie in the connectivity from space with a lot of the things that he's trying to do. And I think it's important we all recognize that space is not some far off, distant thing that we don't need to think about. It is with us every day, and it is helping to solve problems like this every day. So I'll come back, steer back to that in a bit. But first to Alan and your question. When the company started in 2013, there really were no competitors. There were R&D, government-funded R&D to look at it. There were academic research into the problem. There's been a recognition of the problem of space debris since the late 70s. There was a NASA scientist named Kessler, Donald Kessler, who did research in the late 70s saying there weren't even that many assets in orbit then, but at the time saying, this is going to be a problem, guys. I mean, look at just do the math. The more we put up there and the longer it stays up there, there's going to be a risk of a cascading collision event. And the more reliant we get on this technology, the more it's going to impact us. And he was very prescient, obviously, 45 years later, how reliant we are and how much we would be negatively impacted by something like that should it happen today. So the recognition has been there. What hasn't been there, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, is the business case. So who pays for it? Who invests in it? Who are the customers? How do you bring the costs down to a level that makes it worth my while as a satellite operator to pay for that? And then the regulatory environment, as I mentioned. So because of those reasons, no, there weren't any competitors in 2013 when the company was founded. There's a lot now. and it's a good thing. We see a lot of companies that are getting into this area of, it's expanded from debris removal, which is how we branded ourselves and how we have branded ourselves from the start. But we're much more than that. We're really on-orbit servicing. And that on-orbit servicing includes debris removal, servicing, grabbing a satellite and bringing it out of the way. But it also includes repair and refueling and moving satellites between orbits. We see that the technologies that we're developing are going to be applicable to a variety of different services in orbit going forward. And that's only going to grow with the Bransons and the Musks and the Bezoses doing what they're doing. And then, of course, what all the national agencies are doing, it's going to continue to grow. And we see it, and a lot of other companies see it. So not to avoid Alan's question, to get back to Alan's question, yeah, there's companies around the world who are getting involved in this space. I'm actually the chair of a group called Confers, which is an industry-led group that's focused on developing standards and best practices for on-orbit servicing of satellites. And I took over as chair a few months ago. We've got 45 companies as part of our industry group that's focused on lobbying type of efforts, talking to regulatory agencies, and we're international. So a lot of the companies are in the US, but we have ourselves. We've got companies in Europe. And so that alone should be a snapshot into who else is out there focusing on this. And hey, great. We welcome the competition, obviously. It's a nascent industry, and we're open for working together in the whole competimates aspect of where we are now. To tie quickly back into Othman's comment, I really do want to reiterate and get everybody on this group to understand. And I think this group probably does maybe more than a typical sample of society, how important space is, and how it's not something we can just say, oh, cool, astronauts and the Hubble Space Telescope, and interesting, but no real impact on my daily life. There really needs to be a recognition, and it's incumbent on all of us who are aware of this to continue to spread the word that this is part of daily life, and we can't see it, but it's there all the time. And Othman was talking about access to communities that don't have access. I mean, a lot of that's going to be telemedicine. A lot of it's going to be enabled by satellite communications technology. And so we see ourselves as a supporter for that kind of infrastructure. Because again, to follow that thread down, we continue to rely on things like telemedicine, communications in disasters, and we rely on that, what we're getting from space. If we have a disruption in service, which is what we're talking about, is imminently possible, we all suffer. and it is akin, and I hate to analog it to COVID, but it is. I mean, in December of 2019, none of us were thinking, the hotel industry wasn't thinking, boy, we better protect against a global pandemic, because that could be something that really impacts our bottom line. Clearly it did.
Okay.
And so we think that we need to prepare for those kind of events.
Thanks much, Chris. Othman, the business side of what you're doing, how did you get out the giant HMOs and the other companies that might have been real barriers?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think in general, for some of these services that they're not necessarily seen as the most attractive service for traditional healthcare, right? Like major health systems, as well as insurance companies, where they, and as well as pharma, right? In general, the most lucrative and profitable work is actually managing acute care, like managing relatively rare but extremely expensive events, right? And in some ways, almost like many health systems actually do primary care relatively begrudgingly. They actually oftentimes lose money doing primary care just so that you're a customer, so that when you break your leg or have a heart attack or anything, like that's where you go. And it's really about accessing a population, but it's not really the and I think it's primarily because their infrastructure is designed around very heavy events that is expensive to use. Like if you just show up for to a hospital just to renew your statin prescription, that probably costs the hospital at least $100 of overhead. And so doing lightweight transactions is very difficult for them. And so in general, these types of services are actually not seen that attractive as being that attractive. Whereas our belief is that the size of this market is actually much larger, and the value of it is much larger when you're able to reduce the transaction cost to make it highly accessible and available. And so in some ways, like in practice, like they haven't ended up being active competitors oftentimes, because if they don't even see it as like the thing that they really want to be doing in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Alan, follow up?
I have some comments and reflections on the combination of the two and the timing and their potential. I'd like to save them for the end, and I'm ready to take. I'm sure there are some really interesting questions from the audience, and I'd like to.
Okay.
A couple of those.
Let's do what we have time for. I'm going to hijack Phil Key's question though, because I think it doesn't belong just to color. It belongs to both companies. You have real challenges in growth on an international scale. You're both solving world problems, but yet the world is divided into various regions of their own self-interests. How do you internationalize? And Othman, let me ask you to take that first.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think with healthcare, in many ways, it's a hyper-local market. Where even within a country, even the US, different states and different kind of geographies themselves actually have relatively different and partially overlapping healthcare industries, if you will. But I think that's one of the interesting things that happens with technology, is that it does provide the opportunity to build something that is easier to, it's much harder for Kaiser to take its buildings and drop them in Japan. Software is much easier to do that with. And I think while the problems and the kind of specific challenges can be pretty specific per geography, I think that the classes of problems you're trying to solve end up actually translating quite a bit. And so historically, I mean, we're actually available in over 100 countries on the genetic side, but a lot of our activities in the US, primarily just because it's such a massive market. But we're actually actively starting to think about doing more international work now as we're kind of moving into this next phase. But it's like I think it's primarily also like just a commercialization, organization growth and evolution. I think that's one of the biggest steps there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, space is such an interesting market itself. Othman called it a hyper local for that, and in a way it is, and it's an interesting combination in space. It's local because a lot of the initial investment comes from governments through R&D missions and kind of funding of early stage research, and those governments want to see money spent in their own countries. So when the US or Japan invests in a mission as a government, they want to see that money being reinvested into a supply chain and into companies that are in the US. So if we're based only in Japan and we're looking to get dollars from NASA or the European Space Agency, we're going to have a hard time doing that with only a Japan base. So we need to have that presence globally. And so that has driven a lot of our decisions to have a base in these countries that we can take advantage of policy influence, take advantage of getting budgets for these national programs, and so creating companies in these different countries. And space, the space problem is a global problem. We all share the same orbit. Nobody has authority over a certain orbit that's just above their head. So it's a global problem in that it's all shared, but it's a hyper-local problem in that we need to be addressing funding and regulatory issues in each country. So that's driven a lot of our growth strategy from Singapore to Japan and then beyond. Now it obviously brings in complications. I saw a question from Mike Fletcher on the chat about how we scale and how we bring in these an international business operation, coordinating, integrating business units. An incredibly difficult issue in terms of how we make efficiencies in production in each country, still take advantage of these contracts there. So it's a real challenging problem, but it's one that we can't not address. We have to. So that's what we're focused on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. So
Richard,
Alan,
I do have a follow-up question
ahead.
from that for
Sure.
Chris. And your company, it seems to me that you will struggle with the problem of the commons in space. Of everyone benefits from the satellites, everyone would be very disrupted. So all societies would be very disrupted if there were a catastrophic, critical replicating satellite disaster, cascading disaster. And yet no one, I'm thinking it's maybe very difficult to predict whose satellite might initiate that and to get the responsibility to take responsibility. So it seems that you'd have the challenge, the same challenge as global warming, pandemic preparation, of identifying parties to foot the bill for the communication service that we take for granted. Or is that not the case because you can very accurately pinpoint the specific satellite that's likely to cause that problem? Do we know enough about the orbits to do that kind of prediction? Or is it more like global warming and panic where we have to have maybe something like a CO2 tax to keep the space satellite zones clean?
It's a bit, a great question, Alan. And it's a bit like CO2 where we can identify where a lot of the sources are coming from, but actually implementing some kind of regulatory process on those violators is difficult because it is an international thing. I mean, we have no authority from one country to push it on the other. So it's really similar. So that example is exactly what we're dealing with. We can identify who has the largest pieces of environmentally critical debris in orbit. We know who they are. I mean, it's no secret. It's Russia, it's China, and it's the US primarily in that order. Of large pieces of critical debris that would have the highest likelihood of causing an accident, and if an accident happened, would have the highest impact. So we can identify them. But the issue is one issue, and this can be a whole discussion in itself, this regulatory side of how we wrestle the commons issue. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is it's not like the law of the sea where there's a salvage rights. If a ship is left in open waters and it's just left there, it's salvageable. Anybody can go and grab it. That's not the case in orbit. When a satellite is launched, it is the responsibility of that launching state until it re-enters. So a leftover rocket body from a certain country we couldn't just go up and grab it. That would be a violation of international law, violation of what we see as of what the space environment is like. So that makes it really tough for us to go after most of the pieces up there. So we need to start incrementally. So start with countries that we know we can discuss this and take these first steps. Japan, US, UK, Europe. Start there. Prove a technology. Prove that we can organize this international system to make it work, and then hopefully step up to a more global solution.
Thanks.
Othman, would you comment on this? Because in your situation, it's not so much the problem of the free ride, it's different levels of economic development, right?
Yeah, I think it's a different kind of tragedy of the commons challenge in healthcare, which is, I think there are a few different dimensions to it. There's one, a societal one, obviously, like kind of different strata or members of society will have, like, you know, especially in a country like the US, where we don't have as much support for universal healthcare and a fully public health system. I mean, the irony of it is that in practice, on a per capita basis, we actually probably spend more for public health than even the UK or Canada in practice. We just pretend we don't, and we don't admit it to ourselves. And I think the side effect of that is that our dollars are much less efficiently used. So I think that's one of the unfortunate challenges. So that's kind of one dimension of it. I think the other interesting dynamic is with healthcare, the person who's on the hook, the time horizon of the different participants in the market is very different, right? Like you as an individual, you have effectively infinite time horizon with your health, right? Like you're stuck in your body your entire life. The government is generally kind of has a stake in your health for a pretty long window of time. But then an employer or an insurance company might have a very different time horizon, right? Like, you know, on a commercial insurance plan, people are on a plan usually for 2-3 years. So them making you healthier in 5 years or 10 years doesn't necessarily benefit them. And so that's an example of, like, I think where like a lot of regulation and other kind of measures try to kind of incorporate those externalities into kind of like current, you know, but like when you don't have a formal public health system that's kind of like, that is a baseline for across the board, you end up with a lot of heterogeneous incentives and time horizons with which, you know, the market operates, which obviously creates a lot of misaligned incentives.
Okay, thank you. Alan, I'm afraid that we're coming to the time. I need you to give the kind of final comments for the session.
First, let me apologize to the audience, members who had great questions that you weren't able to ask on their behalf. And regarding color, my observation in reflecting on the original meaning of the US-Japan Innovation Awards to show the audience that there's great innovation happening in Japan, and to show Japan how an evolved startup ecosystem works. And so for me, one of the highlights of today was Othman indicating his recollection of experiencing the Twitter situation that we heard about in these awards 11 or 12 years ago as part of his career. And as Japan's ecosystem, there is an increasing amount of serial entrepreneurship. There is an increasing number of people who've experienced a startup going and starting their own company or being involved in a second startup, but it's still certainly not at the level of Silicon. So for me, one of the highlights from Othman's remarks today was learning that he was well aware of that situation at another great startup we had awarded years ago. And now he's moved on to create his own high impact company. And so for my message to the Japanese audience and those who are concerned about moving the state of the Japanese startup ecosystem forward would be that if we could see more people like Othman, that after experiencing either success or failure at a startup, they give it a second shot, or they pursue their own unique dream, leveraging the experience and the network of associations that they gained from a previous startup experience. That's very, very much the dynamic and the key success factor, a key success factor of Silicon Valley. And for I keep calling it Axel Space by mistake, and I just double checked it, and it's not. It's this Chris's company's name.
Is an Astroscale.
Yeah, Astroscale. It's actually a better name, but anyway, for me, the exciting thing about the most exciting thing about Astroscale, obviously, it's a huge problem. One of our early board members, Robert Eberhardt, for years was pushing us to get one of the space startups from Japan on the award. He says there's exciting stuff happening over there. So if Robert Eberhardt is on with us today, a shout out to you for being the visionary within the committee, Robert, to push us to recognize a company like Astroscale many years before the rest of us were able to get around to it. So congratulations to Chris and your company for being the first actual recipient of the Emerging Leader Award in the space field. And thank you to Robert for having the foresight that one day we would finally get our heads around recognizing one of those startups as a leader. But particularly about Astroscale, the thing that I see most exciting is the global presence that you've built, and the fact that though the company started in Japan, is now led by an American CEO. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in the Japanese startup exit over the years that is still not solved is getting more Japanese startups to think globally from the beginning, to act globally from the beginning, to hire and sell and engage and build their business globally from a very early stage. And beyond the enormous scope of the challenge that you're undertaking, it clearly is a global problem. So you need a global organization, but recognizing that early and building a team that can pursue it globally early, and pursuing the financing mechanisms that you need to build that kind of team is a very rare. You're a very rare bird in the Japanese startup ecosystem, and for that, because of the severity of the potential problem, if we don't address space debris in a timely manner, and because of the example that your company will set for other Japanese entrepreneurs, I truly, truly hope that you achieve global success and that you become one of the what I hope is the next generation of Japanese startups who build global businesses again, as they did in the days of Sony and Toyota and Nissan and Canon and others. So I'm hoping that you're one of a new generation of Japanese startups who think and act and succeed globally. So for me, for Robert Eberhardt, we finally have a space company on the podium. For me, we have a company that is acting globally from a very early stage in its business, and that's exciting to see.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. And for everyone, please join me in saying congratulations to Color and to Astroscale for being the SunBridge Emerging Leader Companies for 2021. We look forward to seeing your success in the future. To close out our program today, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Mr. Takahide Akiyama, who is the CEO of the Japan Society of... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing a segment, aren't I? I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. Next, we have an informative presentation from Mr. Gomi of NTT Research. Sorry for missing that. Go ahead, Kazu, the floor is yours.
All right, great. Thank you. No problem, Richard. It was really exciting and inspiring presentations, Colors, Chris and Othman. It was very interesting. And I would like to say congratulations to both of you for this reception of this prestigious award. I'm the last one before the closure of today's sessions. As you witnessed, I'm literally kind of running into before the closure here. But let me just give you a quick intro of why I am here, and then let me say what I needed to say here. So, well, we are basically the sponsor of this event for this Japan Society, and we are definitely the proud sponsor of this. And thanks for inviting inviting us to be here. So I'd like to introduce myself quickly. I'm the head of the NTT Research, which is the R&D organizations of NTT. We opened it up in about 2 years ago in Silicon Valley. Our office is in Sunnyvale today. So NTT, as you probably many people are aware, we are coming from a telecom background, but we ourselves had to transform ourselves like many other industries that from telephone, obviously telephone call nobody makes anymore, to the global ICT companies. And then to make those things happen, we have been innovative. That was definitely the key thing. So let me just quickly share that presentations that I have prepared, but hope you can see it. These are the, let me see here, some of the group at glance, but we are a Japan-led company, but we have global revenue this much, and then Fortune 62 as based upon the latest reports. And then to support the innovations that I would like to, I hope many of you are aware, but we have a venture fund through NTT Ventures, and also the NTT Docomo has the venture arm active in the Silicon Valley. So we have those activities pretty active. And also we are spending $3.6 billion annually for our R&D. So my responsibility is more for this side on the R&D. And just wanted to give you some quick example of kind of innovations that we are working from NTT. And at the end of the day, being a part of the ecosystem of Silicon Valley, that the type of technologies we create, we can work with many startup companies and the Silicon Valley and the ecosystem to make it to basically taking off as a good business. Before closing, I just want to talk a little bit about this new technology that we have just released. And this is actually very solid technology. This is related to the encryptions. So we have encryption is one of our focus in our lab in Silicon Valley. And many encryption new types of scheme is being created. And this is one of them. And the way this encryption technology works is, well, from the technology perspective, this is how it works. You can just encrypt the file, the data with one key. And then unlike the conventional encryption, you can create many different types of decryption keys. And depending upon the type of decryption keys, that the information you get decoded, you can decode is different. So here's a kind of quick use case, but basically what you can do is reduct some of the file depending upon your needs, and you can hide some information, but you can reveal the rest of the information to the recipients. So this is, we believe, is a critical components to make that the IoT industry take off in a true matters by allowing that the necessary informations being shared and transmitted, while you can maintain that the privacy, you can secure the privacy in a correct way. So anyway, we have a lot of discussions going on to make these technologies actually taking into the business right now. But we have other interesting stuff, technology development going on in Sunnyvale. And if you are, I'm looking forward to seeing you in, well, now with this post-COVID era is coming up. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yep.
Thank you very much for your comments. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Was asset-based encryption developed mostly here, or was it developed jointly between here and Japan? How did that work?
Between Japan and here, but more, the particular one I showed you is 100% over here in the US. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are opportunities for technical people who might be looking for work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for your
Thank you very
comments.
much.
So I would like to turn it over to Takahide Akiyama, the CEO of the Japan Society of Northern California, for a few remarks. Takahide, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. I'm Takahide Akiyama of Japan Society, President of Japan Society of Northern California. Thank you very much for joining the Innovation Award Symposium today. Congratulations again, Color and Astroscale, on receiving the SunBridge Emerging Leader Awards for your breakthrough innovation and entrepreneurial leadership in your respective industry. All the best for your future work. Thank you very much, Consul General Maeda, for your kind opening remarks. And thank you also for Michael, for your presentation and interesting comments. Congratulations on your wonderful growth since 2015. This is the second year to hold the symposium online, and we are very pleased to be able to continue our tradition and the signature event of Innovation Award Symposium with so many people joining us online, as it allows many more people to join from many parts of the US and also from Japan. This year's symposium has again been made possible with great support from many organizations and individuals. So taking this opportunity, I would like to thank and recognize the wonderful sponsors, both corporates and individuals. And I hope you are seeing their names on the screen. So I'm sorry, I cannot read out all the names because of the time constraint, but I would like to recognize Mr. Alan Miner and his company SunBridge as an Emerging Leader Award sponsor. And he and his company have been a great partner for this symposium for a very long time, as you have heard. Thank you very much. MUFG Union Bank as Innovation VIP Meetup sponsor has also been a great supporter of the symposium for many, many years. Thank you very much. Morgan Lewis, as you heard, is supporting the symposium as Series A investor. Thank you. We also have a wonderful group of sponsors, the seed investor, Mitsubishi Corporation Americas, who also supports our event later in the year in Tokyo. Google for Startups, NTT, as we just heard from Mr. Gomi, and Persona. You're seeing names of exhibitor sponsors and individual angel investor sponsors as well. Many thanks to wonderful members also of Innovation Awards Steering Committee and Consul, who have contributed their time and expertise, particularly for the selection of the wonderful award winners and showcase companies. We thank you all for your continued support. Also, finally, but not least, I would like to mention a great support from Consulate General of Japan in San Francisco, which has always been a general supporter of this symposium, as well as the activities of the Japan Society. Thank you very much, Consul General Maeda. The symposium has been from the beginning, 11 years ago, in collaboration with the US Asia Technology Management Center at the Stanford University. We'd like to express our deep appreciation for Dr. Richard Dasher for his strong leadership and the Center for the general support. Thank you very much. As you can imagine, there have been so many things going on behind the scene to make the event possible. And those works have been carried out by our very small but dedicated team. I would like to introduce them to you at this time, and they are Ms. Miho Grunberg, Kendra Dunaik, Tomomi Komura of Japan Society, and Kimberly Williams of US Asia Technology Management Center. There are also some Japan Society's student interns who have helped a lot. Sarina, I think you are with us today. Thank you for your help. Thank you all for your hard work, and please, everyone joins me in giving big hands for their wonderful work. I hope you have enjoyed today's program, and we have the second round of the symposium next Thursday, July the 15th, starting at the same time, which is Friday morning, July the 16th in Japan. You'll be meeting 5 exciting showcase companies from Japan. Just to remind you, they are Akipa, Bespoke, BitBiocom, Idein, and Luca Science. You will also be hearing from our keynote speaker, Tomoko Namba, a founder and chairman of DNA of Japan. There'll be also breakout rooms for you to meet executives of the showcase companies personally during the event. I hope to see you all then and have a wonderful week. Until then, thank you again for joining and supporting the symposium, and goodbye for now. Thank you.